Douglas County Community Access Television presents the Regional Report, issues of interest in a complex world, with Regional Reporter Steve Teshara. And now, with today's program, here's Steve Teshara.
Welcome once more to our studios here in Round Hill, Zephyr Cove, Nevada, on the beautiful east shore of Lake Tahoe for another edition of the Regional Report here on Douglas County Community Access Television. And with us today, Bruce Rettig. Welcome, Bruce.
Thank you, Steve.
World traveler. Bruce is an author of literary short stories, essays, creative nonfiction, and flash fiction. We'll have to find out what flash fiction is. I'm sure you'll let us know. So Bruce is a graduate of the University of Colorado, got a Bachelor of Arts degree in Fine Arts and Fine Arts History. He continues to enjoy the creative process and is one of the founding members of Tahoe Writers Works, a local writing group and workshop. He served for 10 years as the publisher of Edge, which was a workshop award-winning literary publication. And Bruce supports various regional arts and culture groups throughout our area. He was on the board of directors of the Tahoe Talac Association for over 10 years, serving as both the treasurer and vice president. Some of you may know Bruce as president and owner of Charter Advertising and Design, which is headquartered here on the South Shore. So Ms. Teshara and I met you back in the 90s, I believe, when you were doing some great creative work for the Lake Tahoe Gaming Alliance, for the Tahoe Casino Express, and ultimately the Tahoe Douglas Visitors Authority. And remember, you won an award there, an Addy, right, for your work on Food and Wine of the Pines.
Yes,
right?
It brings back a lot of memories.
Right. I think that was in 2002, if I remember correctly. So we Tesharas have known the Rettigs, Bruce and his wife Robin, for many years. And what I didn't always realize about Bruce is that he turned out to be a heck of a writer. And we're going to talk about his writing adventures today. But apparently, according to what you've said, it all started with you taking a class at Lake Tahoe Community College.
Yes, way back when. Yeah, I saw a writing class on Lake Tahoe Community College being offered. It was a night class, which fit into my schedule very well, and it was on creative writing. And there was an excellent instructor there at the time, Michael O'Loughlin. He had graduated from the Iowa Workshop, which anybody associated with writing knows that that's a very high-profile workshop in this nation. So he was teaching the course, and I decided to take it. Yeah, it was pretty incredible to have that type of talent and that type of instruction. And at that time, you could actually repeat the classes, and I repeated it. I was going for the record. I repeated the class 9 times. I think the record was 11. Wow. But it was just an excellent class. It had a lot of very strong writers in it, and it was a pure joy to take. And I just realized I had a passion for writing. I had been doing copywriting for advertising for several years, but as far as creative writing, this was something very new.
So and then you began to do some essays, or I mean, you began sort of short stories, things like that?
Yes, there's a literary publication at Lake Tahoe Community College called The Kokanee, and it's actually still going. And Michael came up to me after class one day and said, "Hey, I'd like to publish one of your pieces in The Kokanee." And of course, that was a big boost to my confidence. Right. And so I started submitting other short stories to other literary publications. And I think I've had 14 short stories published now in short fiction and essays.
So you, for material and ideas, you drew upon what, personal experiences or?
Personal experiences, the fiction, it just was a variety of different topics, you know, and subjects that I approached. With a literary short story, it's a lot about characterization and a lot of use of metaphor, just a lot of different techniques that are different in nonfiction work. So I started off with mostly fiction, and then I kind of migrated to nonfiction. I had a small flash fiction piece actually published by the University of Alaska Press, and it was on one of my experiences up in Alaska. And that was kind of the impetus for starting the memoir.
Yeah, so it doesn't seem like you're old enough to have memoirs, but so that's Refraction, right? That's
yes.
And it's covers the period for 4 years when you worked as a merchant marine up in Prudhoe Bay, Alaska, on the Trans-Alaska Pipeline.
Yes.
And Bruce was kind enough to lend Mrs. Teshara and I the first 30 pages of Refraction, which we both devoured immediately. It was great. And what struck me about it is, I don't know if you took notes, I mean, there's obviously places where you couldn't take notes. For instance, you get on the bus and you're going to get your foul weather gear, and you meet a gentleman who is not, his sight is not good, so he asks you if you're a man or a woman, and you start up a conversation. But I mean, that was very real. I mean, imagine that happened a number of years ago, but it was like it happened immediately, like yesterday. So how do you do that?
Yeah, it was really interesting. I did keep a journal while I was up there. It wasn't a full journal. It was just little notes here and there. But what helped me more than anything was I was a fine arts student at the time at University of Colorado, and my emphasis was photography. So I took photographs of just about every day up there. So I had those photographs to go back, and it kind of jogged my memory. But what was really interesting with my fiction work, you always try to build these characters and their voices and how they're unique. With the nonfiction work, when I started going back and remembering all these characters and all these crewmates that I used to work with, it was like I could hear their voices again. It was like I never lost it. It was like even some of the sentences I know they didn't say exactly the way that I wrote them, I said, he would have said it this way. Right. They had very distinct styles.
Wow. So yeah, the photography I'm sure was a help, but sounds like it was such a memorable experience that you could really draw upon it, just like it happened yesterday. And as we sit here today, how many years ago was that?
Oh, gee, well, that was from 82 to 85, 86. Wow. So yeah, it was quite a while back.
Right. So must have been, we can hardly wait to read the rest of the book, the memoir. So we look forward to that. But so it covers multiple years, or mostly the first year, or?
Yes, multiple years, and during that time I also took a trip to Nigeria, Africa on a tugboat, and it just briefly touches on
all the way
that.
over on a tugboat?
On a tugboat, pulling a 300-foot barge. Wow. And we actually hit a storm in the middle of the Atlantic, and we went backwards for about 3 or 4 days. It was pretty rough.
3 or 4 days.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting.
So you don't have a queasy stomach, I guess.
No, I never got seasick. A little sick and tired, but not seasick.
So we sort of jumped ahead, but the writing class, this great instructor, Lake Tahoe Community College, and then starting to get involved with writers groups and being associated with other writers for further inspiration. There's the writers workshop here that went on for a number of years, right? So you met other people in the area doing similar types of creative work.
Correct. We've had a Tahoe Writers Works now for 12 years, and it's still meeting every other week.
Wow.
And it's a really good, strong group, very supportive. We get different people moving in and out all the time. We have young writers, older writers, we have poets, we have nonfiction writers. It's just whatever, if you have a passion for reading and writing, come and join in. It's a great workshop, and it's a good place to bring a piece to get it polished and get input from other people. It's really invaluable. For Refraction, it's about 360 pages, the unedited version, and the workshop workshopped every single page of that piece.
Wow.
And it was really good. Yeah, really very helpful.
And you could do the same for others in the group.
Yes.
To work on their stuff.
Yeah.
Interesting. So, and then over time, it looks like you've associated with, whether it's the Squaw Valley Writers Group and other writers' conferences, workshops, traveling over a fair part of at least the western U.S., if not beyond. It's just something about the creative process and the people that makes it really interesting to get that far into it?
Oh, it's great. And in the Squaw Valley workshop, you have to apply to get into it. So I was very fortunate. I got in there twice. And it has a lot of larger authors like Amy Tan and just some really top-notch authors, and so you get a lot of great input from it. And I'm also involved with the Pacific Northwest Writers Association, and I won a first place award there this year, and I'm actually helping them judge this year's contest. Oh. So the more you start to work with people and other writers, you realize how supportive everybody is. You know, everybody pulls for each other, and there's a lot of different really good groups. There's a group down in Reno as well. So anybody that's interested in writing, that there's a lot of support out there for you.
I think that's important because writing is difficult. It's tough work, right? I mean,
It's lonely.
it's lonely. Yeah.
Yeah, we used to talk about that as a graphic designers. It was nice to work with other graphic designers because you can bounce ideas off of them and see what works, what doesn't. When you're writing, it's usually in the very early hours of the morning or late at night with nobody around. And then once you get it all down on paper, it's like, okay, is this working or not? And that's why the workshops are so important and valuable.
Does Mrs. Rettig ever get to read some of your material?
She does, and she's a good critic. I try not to rely on family and friends too much because they are somewhat not as objective as you would like, but still, she comes from a very creative background too,
Yes,
and she doesn't hold anything back. She's my hardest critic, which is good.
So you met her years after the Merchant Marine adventures, and was that?
Yes, we actually worked together at an advertising agency down in Sacramento, and she was a television producer, and we still do video work together now. She helps me with a couple different projects, but we had met there, and then later on, 3 kids later, 30 years later.
Yeah, you got a great family, all 3 great kids. So, you know, going back and forth, and actually you've been pretty busy with your business and yet finding time to write. And one of the things I learned about you in reading Refraction is that you're okay being a loner. You sort of like that lifestyle in many ways. And so a lot of things that you've done that I know about sort of began to make interesting sense, you know, knowing that. But obviously you found time to do this kind of writing while still keeping up a pretty heavy schedule at Charter Advertising Design. That's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been quite a journey, and you know I've always had these stories, and I've told the kids a lot of these different stories and excerpts, and I call them sea stories from Prudhoe Bay, and they always laugh about it. And I thought, you know, I need to get this down on paper. And then there was some other things that came along, getting the short story published, running into an old crewmate who had published, and all these things kind of propelled me forward. And I thought, you know, I need to get this down on paper. And during my 20s, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I was kind of a loner. And when Robin, my wife, read this, she goes, "Oh, this is why you're the way you are now." With a lot of the different things I do and my little quirks, it's like, yeah, a lot of that was learned back in my 20s.
Yeah, no, I had a similar epiphany about, oh, this makes a lot of sense. So, you know, you're a loner, but you also are very socially agile and very gregarious. So that's a nice combination, and obviously a good storyteller.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
So we're going to ask Bruce a couple of things about, maybe, I'm not sure if you've written about any of these things, but on the course of his advertising and design career, particularly over recent years, Bruce has branched out and done a lot of work in rural Nevada for tribal entities, for a variety of folks who are really loners out in Nevada. So we're going to ask him a couple of stories, only the authorized ones, not the unauthorized ones. But we'll be back with more from Bruce Rettig right after this short break.
The Regional Report receives support from the Gill Professional Building, Lake Tahoe's most professional business location, 218 Elks Point Road, Round Hill, Zephyr Cove, Nevada. Professional office suites now available. Get information at 775-588-2488 or on the web at gillprofessionalbuilding.com.
And we are back with Bruce Rettig, author, advertising, design, professional, one of the great creative people I know. I know that as your practice at Charter Advertising Design began to branch out, you've done a lot of work in rural Nevada. And how did that start? And I know there's a couple stories about motoring off into the desert and traveling a long way to see clients, and interesting stories at the end.
Yeah, actually, I started doing work for Nevada Commission on Tourism several years ago, about 12, 13 years ago, and some of the work was for the Lake Tahoe Visitors Authority, and then slowly other people that worked at the travel industry in Nevada recognized my work, and I did several websites out in rural Nevada. And you know, as they say, in order to help market something, you really need to know the product. So that drew me out to these little small communities and actually learn what they had to offer, what their unique selling points were, what their point of differences were, just to learn all the history. Well, whenever I would go out there, I would usually take one of my kids too and just have one-on-one time. I would talk to some of the Chamber of Commerces and say, I'm thinking of bringing my child out, is that okay? And they would say, sure, that's fine. So we got to learn the area just as a visitor would, just as a tourist would come and learn it. And that would help me to build their websites, help me to market and build the brochures and their magazine ads, and then work with Travel Nevada in helping with the overall effort. So it was quite an experience for me, because you think you have an image of what Nevada is or what the high mountain desert is like, and then all of a sudden you learn a lot more than you wouldn't expect. There's
what
a
were
lot
some
out
of
there.
the things that really struck you as, wow, I didn't expect that?
Yeah, I remember the first time we went out there, it was my son and I, and we went down Highway 375, which is, of course, the extraterrestrial highway. So that was pretty interesting, and going near the test area. I had this image that it was mostly just ghost towns and not much out there. And we'd come to a little town, and I'd tell my son, I'd say, this is a big town for being out here. But then I'm kind of a dirt road junkie. I love to explore, and the kids love that. And I think each one of the kids, whenever I would take them out there, I would pull over to the side of the road, and I'd turn off the car, and I'd say, listen. And it was so quiet. You wouldn't hear traffic. You wouldn't hear an airplane. It was just total quiet. And I remember the look on their faces. They would just, each one would just get this ear-to-ear grin. They had never had that much solitude like that. It's just something really unique that I think people really need to experience, get out there and see some of these places.
And for a person who's also doing photography, must have captured some gorgeous shots.
Some of the most beautiful sunsets I think I've seen have been out there. They're just incredible. The landscape can be rather flat and stark during the day. It's, high mountain desert, of course, you don't see a lot. But once the sun starts going down and all the shadows pop out and the mountains start getting contours and you see these little valleys and different cityscape type outlays, it's just beautiful. It's very beautiful.
So one of the groups of clients I know that you had out there were several of the tribes that have places out in rural Nevada, and they have tourism attractions, and you're helping them to market their product. And what was some of the interesting things that you saw in tribes?
Yeah, that was interesting, because when I started doing work out in eastern Nevada, I went to a couple petroglyph sites that clients pointed me in the right direction to go see. And it was almost like a spiritual experience. I saw this big panorama, and it's just this beautiful artwork, and it was just gorgeous. And I thought, oh gosh, we need to promote this, and other people need to see this. And a couple of the sites, they did have interpretive areas, so the BLM would monitor them. So once I started doing work to try to promote some of these sites, I of course talked to the representative of Indian Territory, and some of these sites are very sensitive.
Right.
So there were some places they wanted to make available to the public, and others that they don't. Yeah, so it's kind of a controversial thing. But I started doing more and more work for the Indian Territory, and there's 3 major tribes. There's the Washoe, of course, is our local tribe, and then there's the Shoshone, and then the Paiute. There's the northern and western Shoshone. But I started doing more and more work for them, and I do work for Pyramid Lake, and I do a lot of work for Stewart Indian School, which we just attended the Stewart Father's Day powwow yesterday. Wow. And my wife and I worked behind the booth, and it's just
nice.
a great event. It's one of my favorite events of the year. And it's kind of a tradition, too. I've been attending it for about 10 or 12 years now with my children, so it continues. Yeah.
So have any of those experiences led to any writing, or maybe that's out there still for you?
Yes, it's kind of a segue with refraction. It's kind of a rite of passage type story, and it's about not knowing what direction you're headed in your 20s, and then you look at all these different options, and it was so much solitude up in Alaska. It was a real unique experience for me. And I think everybody goes through that kind of rite of passage in time in their life where they're not quite sure where they're headed. And that's what that story, a lot of it's about. And of course, a lot of it has layers of big oil and big industry, and touches upon a couple subjects, which are really relevant today too, with the different pipelines, with Dakota Access Pipeline, the Keystone Pipeline. It kind of touches some of those things. So later chapters reflect back to how I felt then, and how I feel now about the oil companies. Now I'm looking at possibly doing another memoir about my journeys out in Nevada. I've had a couple stories published about my experiences out there, and and just growing up, having my children grow up in that environment, in that exploratory type nature, and going out into Nevada. And there's a lot of interesting connections to the testing, the test area, atomic testing. There's a connection with Alaska. A lot of the atomic testing that happened in Nevada drifted, all the test radiation drifted up towards the North Pole, and the cancer rate actually went up in the indigenous people by about 20% during the test time.
I did not realize that.
It's really, really interesting, and there was a lot of, they wanted to do some nuclear type construction up in Alaska using atomic detonations to build bays and different things like that. So there's kind of a connection with the history there too.
Did they ever do that, or did they decide that was maybe not the right thing to do?
They decided not to. There was a project called Project Chariot, and I talk about it in my book, and they actually had planned to build a harbor by detonating this landmass on the coast of Alaska, and then it would fill in with seawater, of course. That didn't happen, but what they did do is they took some of the radioactive tailings from the Nevada test area, and they actually shipped it to Alaska and introduced it into the water streams and everything to see what it would do. I know it sounds like a crazy story.
Oh, really?
And I did a lot of research on it, and there's still tailings up there. But
Wow.
there was that was at the same time, there was also some testing in the Marshall Islands. There was just a lot going on with nuclear type
We
tests.
probably didn't know as much about it then as we know now, and we would say, "Oh, let's not do that," right?
Yeah.
Interesting.
And I was recently in Marshall Islands. I traveled out there for a client and talked to several of the locals, and they're on the third generation of very high cancer rates right now.
Wow.
So it's, yeah, there was a lot of testing going on at that time. And that's another strength, I think, of refraction, too. During the 80s, there was a lot going on politically with the Cold War. We had the dew line system up in Alaska where they had all the different stations that were keeping an eye on Russia. Those were still up. We didn't have satellites back then, or
Right.
at least not like we have now. So everything was on outposts, and we visited a lot of those outposts while I was up there.
You didn't have any politicians looking out their back door saying, "I could see Russia."
No, but I think they used drill baby drill back then too. And then now recently they're talking about opening up ANWR, which is the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, and that's a big hot topic right now too.
Right.
And that's always been off limits for the longest time, but now there's the possibility that they're going to start selling oil leases there.
Wow. So it's not easy to get published.
No, it's quite the process.
So describe a little bit about it, because it seems like if you're a really good writer, as you are, it seems like it would be a little easier to get published, but it's almost like trying to get a movie made or produced or something.
Yeah, I find it
Have
kind
to
of
have agents and-
I kind of find that ironic because it is all about the marketing. Excuse me. And I've been in marketing all these years,
Right.
and marketing might be preventing me from getting published right now, but it is all about sales, and things change from year to year. One year, romantic novels are really high. Memoirs were really hot like 5 years ago. Now they've kind of tailed off, and I've had a lot of agents say, Bruce, I've just had a lot of hard times selling memoirs right now. You need to be like a big name. And so there's a lot of different things that come into it. But it boils all down to marketing. There's also the self-publishing route, and I've thought of that, but I'm kind of want to try to promote in the traditional route, and see how far I can get with that.
So when you go to these writer conferences or some of the other groups that you're involved in, sometimes you're asked to talk a little bit about your writing process, or you listen to other people talk about their writing process, and you can exchange techniques. How does that work? What do you share as a technique that you have?
Well, I think that the one thing, a question that an agent asked me once, and I think it's really relevant, is why are you the person to tell this story? I think it needs to be something that uniquely you need to tell. It's your story, and I think that it's a very personal thing. And then also, why is the story important? What are you trying to convey? What's the message you're trying to convey? And did you convey it successfully? I mean, that's a very important thing. And that was the thing with writing refraction again, too, was I see my kids growing up in their young 20s, and I see their friends growing up, and it's a tough time. They don't know where they want to go. There's a lot of kids that are suffering depression, very negative thoughts, and when I talk to them, I say, you know, I made it through. You got to keep going.
Right.
You know, the 20s are a hard time, and you're actually not a full adult. Now they're saying, they used to say by 23 your brain is developed into adulthood. Now they're saying it's like 25 to 27.
Wow.
So these kids are going through some very challenging times right now, especially now with all the different demands and things going on around the world. And you know, I went through it, and it was tough. And I was up in Alaska at a place where it was a great amount of solitude. And, you know, that was a message I wanted people to take away from it, too. It's not just about the oil companies, not just about the pipelines, but it's about growing up and seeing these challenges in the world and working your way through it.
I guess I can conclude from that I moved to Tahoe before my brain was fully developed. Not surprising, I guess. But I'm still here. So what other things are on the horizon for Bruce Rettig, both in terms of charter and your writing career?
Yeah, my as far as a professional day job, most of my emphasis has been on the indigenous tribes. I've been doing work for a lot of the American Indian Nevada tribes, which is great. I still do a lot of work for the rurals, other rurals, little small towns out in the middle of Nevada. I'm doing work, some work in Micronesia for some of the islanders. When you get to a certain point in your career, it's nice to where you can kind of choose some of the jobs that you want to work on, and I'm trying to keep my client base to jobs that I believe in, that I think that I can help, that it's not just the paycheck, but it's actually helping people too. As far as the writing, yeah, I've started another project actually dealing with Nevada in that second part of my life, and taking the kids out there and the people I've met out in Nevada. There's something about the high mountain desert that you find yourself when you're driving along the road by yourself or with one other kid or with a kid or something, and that's it. You're just out there. So you start to turn inside and you learn more about yourself. And so I want to kind of play off of that too. And of course the test area. There's a lot out there to write about. There's a lot of material. And a lot of people have wandered out into Nevada to find themselves, and those stories in themselves are just fantastic.
So when you're at some of these places, whether it's a tribal area or just a rural area in general, you probably meet some characters who have some stories to tell, and that may wind up, maybe the name's different or something in a future book or essay.
That's the thing. You have to be a little careful too, and then culturally too. You have to be culturally sensitive. Yeah, with some of the people and some of the names, there's some very colorful stories. My son and I, as you heard the story I told you a while back, we got arrested in Area 51 inside the boundary, and that's quite a story. And we had that published, I actually had that short story published by the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. It was published, but that was a colorful story. But you have to be careful, yeah.
So people can go to your website if they want to learn more about your writing and your works and how to enjoy some of the things that you've written. It's brucerettig.com, right? Easy enough.
Easy enough,
right.
Yes.
Bruce, great pleasure to have you on the program.
Well, thank you. I
thank
appreciate
you so much.
it. Thank you all.
So something a little different, you know, you never know what you're going to get when you tune into the Regional Report, a feature here on Douglas County Community Access Television. We'll see you next time.
You've been watching the Regional Report with Regional Reporter Steve Teshara. Studio location provided by the Gill Professional Building, 218 Elks Point Road, Round Hill, Zephyr Cove, Lake Tahoe. Graphic design and titles by Charter Advertising Design. Announcer Ed Miller, Wild West Communications. Production by Lloyd Higuera and Douglas County Community Access Television.